Let us talk about a word called as movement. Right. Now, in physics, if in a physical physics point of term, we say that it is the displacement of a body. Correct. So we can associate the same definition to biology, where we say movement is change of position of a part of a part. So when you have a part, let us say there is this tendril. Let us draw this structure, this tendril. Right. Now, if this tendril changes its original position from here to, let's say, it's going towards here, like this. So this tendril has moved. There is a movement. Right. It can be due to wind or not. Now, this is called as movement, and this movement, majority of the cases, is temporary. And in a very few cases, it is permanent. Right. Now, even in our body also, we see a lot of movements. Like when we are talking, if you see our tongue keeps moving up and down, sideways. When you're eating, our tongue moves. There is our eyelids which keep on moving. That battering of the eyelids. And when you're sleeping, your eyelids close. So they're changing from one position to another. Right. So there are a lot of movements that keep happening within our body. Now, this movement is seen even in non-living substances also, in non-living structures, like for example, the case of our fan, our electric fan. So when you give electric current to it, what happens to this? The fan starts moving, it starts rotating, right? So starts rotating. In the same place, it is rotating, right? When you stop the electric current, it will stop the movement. Correct. So basically, whether it is a living organism or whether it's a non-living organism, movement is induced by a stimulus. Movement is induced by stimulus. Now, this stimulus can be external stimulus or internal stimulus. It can be a signal that is coming from inside, or it is a reaction to a signal that has come from outside. Either ways. Now, there is another type of movement that we talk about, which is called locomotion. Now, what is locomotion? Let us say I have an individual sitting in this point A. Now, after some time, he slowly gets up and walks towards another position called point B. Right. Then he keeps standing in that position. So in point A, he is sitting. In point B, he is standing. Then after some time, he will move from point B to point C, where again he is sitting. So what is happening here? The individual is voluntarily moving the location. He's moving from one place to another. So locomotion is movement from one location or place to another. Right. So this movement from A to B, B to C, voluntarily, he's doing it voluntarily, right? So this is called locomotion. Similarly, you can see it when you're taking a bicycle and you're riding the bicycle, when you're throwing a ball. All of these movements are voluntary movements. Right. So locomotion is a kind of movement where it is movement from one place to another. Whereas in general, when we say movement, it is basically change in the position of a part. Please understand that all locomotions can be called as a movement. Let us write it here. All locomotions are movements. Right. But all movements are not locomotion. They are not locomotion. For example, when there is wind, the leaves, they flutter in the wind. So the leaf is moving its position. But is the leaf under locomotion? No, because its location is the same. It is still in the same location. It is just changing the position. So all movements are not locomotion. A movement is a locomotion specifically when it is involved in the change of the location. Right. Now, basically, the structures that are associated with locomotion, the same structures are associated with movement, specifically with respect to human beings. Like, for example, limbs. When we say limbs, limbs contains muscles. Muscles can carry out the movement, and it also helps in locomotion. So the same kind of structures are associated with locomotion and movement altogether. Now, basically, we have three types of movements. It is seen in cells of human body: amoeboid movement, ciliary movement, and muscular movement. In fact, these two, that is the amoeboid and the ciliary, they are also called as the non-muscular movements. Non-muscular movements, because here the structure that is exhibiting the kind of movement is not a muscle. In this case, in the muscular one, the muscle is the structure that is associated with locomotion and movement, but that is not available here in the amoeboid and the ciliary movement. So first, let us understand what is amoeboid movement. Now, if you can see this GIF, it clearly talks about the amoeboid movement. And in amoeboid movement, you have the formation of a structure called as pseudopodia. Right. So pseudopodia, which is a false feet of structure, is actually a protrusion from the protoplasm of the cell, and it causes to change the shape of the cell body, and it creates a crawling like motion. It creates a crawling motion, a movement which looks like as if you're crawling, right? And this takes place when the cytoplasm slides and forms the pseudopodia, and as a result the cell is moving forward. In us, in human beings, this is seen in the macrophages, in the cells like macrophages. They show this kind of amoeboid movement. The second type of movement is the ciliary movement, where the ciliated epithelial cells show this movement. Now, these are present in the gastrointestinal tract. They are present in the epididymis, in the fallopian tubes. These structures, they contain these ciliated epithelial cells. So, what do they do? Now, these ciliated epithelial cells, they contain structures on their body called as cilia, and they are in fact, you have two structures, right? Like cilia and flagella. Flagella is comparatively longer than cilia. So here, this is the example of the airway. This is the respiratory surface. Here it is a respiratory surface. Okay, which is lined with the respiratory tract, like you can say it is like trachea, which is lined with the ciliated epithelium. So what happens here? There will be a rowing. Can you see? It's as if you're rowing. You're taking if you're boating, if you go for a boating, you take the paddles and you row. So this rowing like stroke, it's a stroke movement, right? It's a power stroke, and so there is one power stroke and one recovery stroke. When the cilia is like this, and when it goes towards this direction, it is a power stroke, and when it is coming back to the original position, we call it as the recovery stroke. So by doing the power stroke and the recovery stroke, there is this continuous movement of cilia. What it does, if you can see in the GIF, it is in the power stroke, it is pushing the thing backwards, right? Or frontwards, whatever direction it is pushing the substances towards one direction. So this is ciliatory movement. As I've said, they are not only present in the linings of the Trachea, they're present in the oviducts of females, which is nothing but the fallopian tubes. The vas efferentia of the males, the epididymis regions. Okay, all these contain these particular ciliatory movement, which is shown by the ciliatory epithelium. So the third variety is the muscular movement, and muscular movement basically is the contraction of the muscles. As we said, you have a specific structure here which is called as the muscle, and these muscle, when it undergoes this contraction, basically it creates the movement of body organs and locomotion of the body itself. So the muscles actually internally they contain structures which are called as myofilaments. Okay, it contains specialized structures called as myofilaments or filaments of the muscles, and these myofilaments, when they slide upon each other, it results in the contraction of the muscle fibers. It results in the contraction of the muscle fibers. Now muscle fibers actually is equal to the word muscle cell. Muscle cell or muscle fiber, basically there are two terms for the same structure. Because the cell is elongated, we call it as muscle fiber or myofiber. It is also called as myofibers. Right, so basically the contraction of the movement of the muscle is due to the movement of the muscle fibers, which is in turn caused by the myofilaments. And what it does, it creates two things: movement of body organs, like movement of the neck towards some direction, the movement of the head, movement of the tongue, movement of the jaws. So all, and then internally if you talk about it, then there is the movement of the heartbeat, the circulation, the peristaltic movement of the alimentary canal. So all of these movements are movements of the body organs. And then there is the locomotion, where there is the movement of the organism from one place to another. The human being moves from A to B, B to C. So both this internal movement and locomotion in humans is based on the muscular movement. In fact, in human beings, this movement and locomotion, it is not purely associated with muscles. In fact, it is associated with muscles plus certain bones that are joined to the muscles, and there are some joints that are present between the bones. So you have the muscles, one structural element, then bones, which is another structural element, okay, and joints which help in the movement. So all these three together, you have to understand that when you're talking about movement and locomotion in human beings, you cannot just simply concentrate on muscles. You have to consider all these three. You have to consider muscles, bones and joints together, and all of these three together forms an integrated system called as the musculoskeletal system. The musculoskeletal system, which is associated with locomotion and movement in humans. It is associated with locomotion and movement in humans. Right. So when we are studying about locomotion and movement, what you're actually learning is you need to learn about the muscles, which muscles attach to the bones, what are the different type of bones in our body, and what are the different joints, and to involve, and together you're going to study all of them to understand how locomotion and movement is happening. So that is what we are going to see in this chapter, and we are going to start first obviously with muscles. So we are going to understand the structure of the muscle. We are going to understand what is this muscle fiber, what is this filament, how are they sliding on each other to bring about that muscle contraction, how that happens, and then we'll go to the bones, the skeletal system part, and then finally we'll come to the joints and we'll understand the different type of joint based movements.